Welcome back. We're to have with us Mr. Paul Eluhaiwe, who is the Special Advisor to the CBN Governor on Development Finance. Well, you were talking about the funds in the TSA just before we went on break. You know, some people have argued that the timing of the TSA, because before now we had been warned that we could be going into a recession, and some people felt that it was not time for the CBN and even the government to be mopping out funds from the public sector, from the economy, as it were, which was what they felt the TSA was. But you argue otherwise.
Yes, for the fact that the money you find in TSA were really government resources. We expect that banks beyond the government resources, they have their financial base, is it not? They have the financial base, and we expect that such resources should be made available for the real sector development. As we speak, what we expect from the money from the TSA to do for Nigeria is focusing on the real sector of the economy. That adds up to what the banks themselves can put into the real sector, particularly where we have comparative advantage as a nation. Agriculture gives us that great base. If you look at the land mass we have in Nigeria, only about 1.something million hectares have irrigation facility as we speak. If government is able to channel resources in developing the real sector, particularly, like I said, in agriculture, if you look at our rural roads, they're in bad shape. Rural roads are not there. Infrastructure such as commodity exchange is not adequately functioning. Those are institutions. If you talk about silos that in Nigeria that are not working, are not doing well, I talked about rural road, we talked about irrigation. Such money should be channeled into such areas that will help develop the agricultural sector.
Which were the areas?
The banks themselves, at that level, will now be able to finance real sector activity.
Those are the areas that the CBN was hoping that the banks would look towards. And in some instances, they had some facilities that they let the banks, have at single digit. They were supposed to give out to people at single digit interest rates. But when the banks were awash with cash, some of these developments did not happen. How did the CBN expect that when they now, mopped up the funds through the TSA, that the banks are going to be doing this sort of lending? For
us, the banks were never overwashed up with their cash. The banks themselves were not prepared to even finance agriculture from the beginning. As we speak, banks lending to agriculture as far back as 2009 was only 1.4% of the credit to the real sector of the economy. Recently, it became about 3.74%. And let me let you know that most of those resources you find putting into the real sector of the economy came from the Central Bank of Nigeria, whether it's agriculture, whether it's micro, small, and medium enterprises, whether it's the power sector, whether it's the airline, whether it's the textile industry. All of them came from Central Bank. I will give you detail. In terms of entrepreneurship development, it's still the CBN that have been doing. The banks themselves have never been prepared. They see the real sector as too risky for them. And there are so many reasons for them. Sometimes we accommodate what they think because the basic infrastructure that is supposed to be available for them to operate are not there. However, they have never made an attempt on their part to see what they can do. The capacity is not there in the bank. Information asymmetry. They feel they are not committed themselves. They don't want to take any level of risk. These are some of the... It's not because the banks are awash with credit in the economy. Is because that passion to really focus on the rest. They were focusing on the blue chip environment, like the oil industry, the telecommunication industry. For any nation to get developed, you really have to focus on agriculture. Basically, that is the basis of industrialization. From agriculture to processing of agricultural raw materials, that puts not only food on the table for everybody, it brings all the fibers that you need by the manufacturing sector, and that's what happens. If you go to China, that's the only way China will develop. A Chinese will tell you the only way to get out of poverty, the only way for inclusive financing, the only way for inclusive economy is through agriculture.
And a lot of people, will say that they've seen what the CBN is doing in that regard, especially through the Anchor Borrowers Program. Right. But then, they also ask if there is a grand plan? Because they say that the CBN seems to be going outside of its purview. It's supposed to be able to maybe successfully do this. It's supposed to be collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture, perhaps, and also, you know, doing something in tandem with the Ministry of Finance. Is there some grand policy that the CBN is trying to help implement alongside the same ministries?
Let me explain this. Let me give this little clarification on the issues. CBN has never gone outside its purview. The Act, a section of the Act of the Central Bank Act of 2007, section that's the 31 of that act, authorizes authorizes the CBN to do anything that has to do with development. And when you talk about development, it's about financing the real sector of the economy. Having explained that, on the issue of what is CBN doing, particularly with collaboration with government, as we speak, we collaborate with Federal Ministry of Finance on the Anchor Borrowers Program. Under the Anchor Borrowers Program, every stakeholder has responsibility. The federal government has responsibility, the state government has responsibility, the private sector has responsibility, the banks have responsibility. We have never left out any key stakeholder in any intervention we are putting up, particularly Anchor, which is the recent. Let me explain to you on the Anchor. For the testing and piloting of the Anchor, we went to Kebbi that does dry season rice production. We were able to get 78,000 farmers on board. I would like you, if China have a way of investigating what's happening in Kebbi, to go to Kebbi and see the level of productivity. There's no time my governor went to Kebbi State without the Minister of Agriculture. And like I told you, we collaborated with the state government. Currently, under the Anchor Borrowers Program, Mr. President have asked us to replicate it in most states in the Federation. As we speak, we're in about 13 states now, ranging for the dry season, for the wet season production of rice. In the dry season, we did rice in Kebbi, we did wheat in Kebbi. And farmers were getting as high as 5 tons per hectare to about 8 tons per hectare for rice. The same thing applied to the wheat. So we have always carried everybody along, and we are looking towards this wet season to see how we're going to ramp up the productivity. We even went to the extent along the Bank of Agriculture to engage champs to do BVM for the farmers. So we are not focusing only on productivity, we're focusing on things that will enhance productivity. As we speak, Champs is doing BVM for the farmers. That is inclusive finance, bringing a lot of people on board the formal financial platform. Beyond Champs, the collateral registry, we are going to upload every farmer that we are giving a BVN number to the collateral registry, where any bank that want to finance a smallholder farmer will be able to check the collateral registry, enable farmers to register their movable and immovable assets. So, and farmers come under cooperative under the Anchor Borrowers Program. If you upload them, you link them up together. If anyone doesn't pay and the group doesn't pay, they are automatically disenfranchised for participating under the Anchor Borrowers Program.
Mr. Eluhaiwe, I believe that my colleagues in Lagos would like to come in at this point.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, because part of one of the
thank you so much.
Part of the criticism that industry watchers have for the CBN is their banking supervision role. Some of them think that the banks not lending to the real sector, and you haven't highlighted some of those challenges. Does that then mean that we'll throw our hands up in the air and leave it as it is?
Not really. Thank you for your question. The issue you raised. Not really. And what we do, for what we are doing currently, with respect to that, we are not leaving the banks. We know if any economy has to move, if any economy has to grow, the banking sector must support. The Deposit Money Bank, as we speak today, we build capacity for Deposit Money Bank staff who are financing the real sector of the economy. We have almost taken over the Bank of Agriculture. We are now itching for restructuring or the Bank of Agriculture to be able to do what it has to do. And same with the other development finance institution. If you recall, CBN put so much money in the Bank of Industry, and that's where why the Bank of Industry has been turned around as we speak today.